Now, the new ways of conducting active positions in the opening, conducting and playing it in the middle game, designing. This is another Kasparov's game against Argentinian GM Daniel Campora. C4, knight f6, d4, e6, knight c3, d5. Queen's Gambit declined, as old as the game of chess is. C takes d, e takes d, and bishop g5. Bishop e7, e3. Not much to talk about the opening part here. I will move fast now. Castle by black. Bishop d3, knight b to d7, knight g to e2, rook to e8, queen to c2, knight f8. This is all been played many, many times. And castles long. Now, white castles long, they're clearly indicating that they don't want the quiet position when they castle short and play for f3, e4. They want the accent on king side attack. So castles, bishop e6, king b1, and here black decides to simplify position by playing knight g4, attacking f2 square and hitting white's dark square bishop. So bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, and knight f4. White attacks d5 pawn. So eventually white has to start advancing kingside pawns, and that's how they're going to get their attack. Knight f4, knight f6. The idea was designed in the opening, the idea of playing an attack on kingside. No means, no ways of attacking, but the idea. That's why white castled long on a queen side. So after knight f6, Kasparov goes f3, and we know what white wants to do. White wants to do g4, g5, and storm on a king side, or maybe even playing e4. So after f3, black played c5. Now black cannot allow white to just start kingside attack without any counterplay on the opposite side of the board. So after c5, white went g4, and here now we're seeing attacks on opposite sides of the board. So black has here several options. One option they have is to play c4, and after white moves the bishop, maybe go b5 and have a counterplay on the queen side, which I think was the better choice. Instead, black played c takes d, e takes d, and queen d6. But now what we're going to see, what has happened? This, I think, was big positional mistake. By exchanging black's c pawn to white's e pawn, black eliminated all their chances to attack on a queen side by playing c4 and b5. Meanwhile, white remained, whilst has the same opportunity as they started with, will go g5, h4, and attack on king side. So after queen d6, knight was hanging, so queen d2, black goes a6, and now knight c3 to e2. That's a very good move. And why is it a very good move? We're going to talk now. Now let's put the knight back on c3. And let's talk about this position. What does white want? Just pushing g5 and after knight d7 going h4, that's good for white as a plan. But then they have to go h5, g6 and slowly open black's position. Black is going to try to play b5, a5 or b4 in any move order. White's knight on c3 is going to have to move anyway. So in this position, what white does, they play knight c3 to e2 before they get kicked with b5, b4, and then they prepare to use this knight to go to g3 and participate in kingside attack. It's a very good planning. Knight c3 to e2, rook to e7. Black does not have an active plan. Knight g3, and I see targeting the critical squares, as we mentioned. Knight g6, and now comes another very strong move by white. Obviously, white does not want to exchange defending pieces to attacking pieces. What they do instead, they retreat knight from f4 to g2. Now you can tell these knights on g6 and f6, black's knight, they are not good defenders. They are right on the way of white's pawn storm. When white starts moving the pawns, knight will be kicked away, knight's going to be kicked away, and white will be gaining time as well. Knight g2, knight d7, rook h to g1, rook e to e8, rook d to f1. Now we can see here that black is not doing very well as far as the counterattack goes. If black is not doing very well in counterattack, so white has all the time to assault general attack. They can prepare their sources, so they prepare all the pieces for general attack. Rook d to f1, knight g to f8. Now knight goes to e3, and white is ready to play knight f5. Well, what I can say here only, I'm sure this is a good way to play for white. But another way, there are different players. Well, I don't know if there are players on Kasparov's level, but quite strong player could have been as successful in this game if instead of this piece maneuvering, they just started storming on a king side with all the pawns. I think that would have been also very successful. That's the way I would have done, and it could not have been a bad plan. Well, I don't know which one is better. Knight e3, king h8, knight h5, g6, and here black is attacking white's knight, but this knight can be just left on h5. White played f4, and after f4 you see that white wants to go f5. There is no way black can stop f5. So black played g takes h, and now f5. So what happens? White sacrificed knight, they get back the bishop, and meanwhile what happens? They don't gain material, but they completely open black's king. Black went h4, and after f takes e, f takes e. White goes g5. This is necessity. They have to open king's position more. Now what has happened in last 10 moves, it looks like only white made a progress. White did all the attack on king side without any resistance and any counterplay on queen side. And we know when opponents castle on opposite sides of the board, just concentrate on defense only is a very bad strategy in the big majority of the cases. And that's what black has done so far. All they did was they just trying to defend, and now they are totally busted. So after g5, rook e7, trying to defend again, knight g4. Black has completely forgotten about counterattack. What now? They probably just remembered, but it's too late. Rook g7, knight h6. White's piece is creeping towards the black's king. Queen b6, g6. And here we see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of white gonna assault now black's king, and the death is very near. H takes g, knight f7, king g8, queen h6. And you see it's several different mates are threatening there, and that's the kind of position where both sides can dream about quick end. Rook h7, rook takes g6, knight takes g6, queen takes g6, rook g7, and queen h6 back. The final few moves in those kind of games are not as spectacular and not really as important, because white did not win this game because they have queen h6 move and there is mate on h8. Otherwise black would have been okay. No, there's one of the ways to end. There probably were several others. Now when rook takes f7, there's simply rook g1 check and mate next move. So position was lost by black long time ago when we saw that white started moving forward, and we did not see any counterplay on the other side of the board. That was obvious. The game is not going to last long. And it didn't. So let's make the few conclusions after this game. Remember, when kings are castled on opposite sides of the board, it's very important, be very efficient, and you know that chances for defense, if one of the sides goes for total defense, chances for this defense are not good. How about the perspectives? What you're looking forward to? You're looking forward to nothing, and your chances for defense are slim. Altogether, it doesn't look very good. The only commonly, the only good way to play those type of positions is by counterattacking. And there is an expression in chess, the counterattack is the best defense. And in most cases, it is true. So let's look at at the other game that was played by Kasparov. That was actually very, very nicely conducted game, also played in the opening. Opening was played with isolated pawns. Okay, c4, e6. Here we're going to the game against Cuban GM Jesus Nogueiras. Knight f3, d5, d4, knight f6. And this is again, the opening is Queen's Gambit decline. D takes c, knight c3, a6, a4, bishop b4, e3, c5, bishop takes c4, c takes d, e takes d. Knight c6, castles, and castle. Now, what can we say at this position? This is one of the most common pawn structures in a chess. I can name you, I don't know, maybe half a dozen openings where you can see that white or black ends up with isolated pass pawn. It's always the big mystery whether this pawn on d4 is a weakness or the strength. It depends how you play it. This pawn on d4 guarantees white some space advantage and some critical squares in its center, and at the same time it can be a target, can be a weakness, and it also creates weak square for black to control on d5. So it's very important to be very accurate. Each side has to take the advantage of the opportunities they have. So rook c1 by white, bishop e7, and rook e1. White's plan in this game, in this position, to place pieces as active as they can possibly do. And they are doing it. They're putting rooks on e1, c1. Both bishops are active, knights, everything is active. Black's pieces are not as active, but black cannot be as active now. What black wants to do, they want to develop the pieces, for example, b6, bishop b7, knight b4. That would be the dream position, and establish some minor piece on the critical d5 square. So let's see how it went. h6 was played, very dubious move by Nogueiras, and Kasparov played bishop f4, and now it was played bishop d7. Now let's look at this position. Now immediately when somebody plays move like bishop d7, you see that black's pieces are very passive. Black does not have a grip, good enough grip, on d5 square. And white's d5 opportunity to play d5, to open position in the center and have better piece position, better aim in the center, can be very meaningful. So Kasparov could have played d5 right now, but he chose to do a little more build-up of the pieces. Knight e5, rook c8. And here he played knight takes d7. Queen takes d7 and d5. Now, position completely changing. There will be no more isolated pawn for white, and there will be no more d5 square for black. So after d5, ed, white is playing for activity in the center and better piece position. Knight takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop takes d5. And now we see that black is facing quite a few problems. Problem number one, threatening bishop takes f7 check, winning the queen on d7. And after rook takes f7, queen takes d7. So obviously black has many ways to defend. So black chose bishop g5. Black is anxious here to exchange some pieces, some minor pieces, and relieve the pressure. Bishop takes f7 is not good now because queen takes f7. So here white plays bishop takes g5, h takes g. And let's talk about this position. Black has somewhat weak pawn on g5. White has very well centralized bishop on d5. Also, there is a possibility, you see the H file is open. Maybe we can create some kind of threats. Next move is played by Kasparov, is so powerful that I can say maybe it does not even belong in this series. It's like a very, very special, only like a members-only move, like h4 only for members to see because it's so difficult and complicated. Once I already mentioned, let's go all the way. H4, what is the idea of this move? Okay, let's talk about it. Let's put pawn back to H2 and see what does white want to do. What white wants to do is remove the queen from D1 and put the rook on D1. So put the queen somewhere to B3, maybe rook on D1, and then it's too much pressure in the center. And standing of queen, black's queen, and white's rook on D1 is not very healthy for the queen. So, but how can they do that? If they play queen F3, they have to be prepared for some kind of knight D4 move. If they play queen B3, same knight D4 may be troubling. For example, knight D4, and if queen takes B7, then you see that black is winning because queen takes B7, bishop takes B7, rook takes C1, rook takes C1, and knight E2 check, black wins. So what we can conclude here, and obviously our decision will be based on, so we have to move this queen on D1. There are two squares from where this queen will be protecting this bishop, B3 and F3, not counting the D file, because we don't want to move the queen and be pinned at the same time. That's what H4 is. It's one of the best moves I have seen in chess. H4, and after a long consideration, black played rook F to D8. Now let's see what happens if simply G takes H. Now what happens if G takes H is white find third square besides B3 and F3 to keep an eye on D5 bishop by playing queen H5 and putting rook on D1. Black is in very bad shape. At the same time, white is threatening bishop E4. Also rook D1. This position is real bad. We can actually extend the list of threats by white here, like something like rook C4, threatening to take on H4 and end the torture on H file. So after H4, Nogueiras, I've known him for a while. He loves pawns. He did not take these pawns. Normally, nobody loves pawns given by Kasparov because they are not ordinarily as tasty as pawns given by weaker players. So H4, rook F to D8, attacking bishop. It looks like attacking bishop, but it's not. White simply played H takes G, and you can tell that queen takes D5 loses because of rook E8 check. And if black takes the rook, then white wins the queen. And if black plays king H7, then queen H5 gives white absolutely winning position, which means checkmate. So now, in this position, after H takes G, white has an extra pawn, and white has a better position. Queen F5 played by black, then rook C5 by white. Protecting the bishop, G6, queen B3. Now threatening queen takes B7. Now game practically is over. Rook B8. When you are pawn down and you have to make passive moves at the same time, it's not good. Queen C4. Rook E8. Rook takes E8 check. Rook takes E8. Bishop takes C6. and white's attacking black's queen, and game ended in a couple of moves like rook e1 check, king h2, queen takes f2. Now all of a sudden we see black is attacking white. Black attacks is exactly 2 move long and ends with nothing. It's again very bad combination. Queen g1 check, king g3, and black had to face reality, and reality tells him that's a good time to resign, which he did. Very nicely played game. I remember analyzing this game with some of my colleagues, and they said, this is like a game that was won with one move, like h4. No, it wasn't. The planning was very good. If your planning is very good and execution is okay, see, execution does not have to be very perfect. The planning is more important, to have good plan and okay execution. And what happens here, if you plan well and you execute it well, that does not mean that there is a guarantee for a win, because there is also planning in defense and executing defense properly. So if both sides played on a equally high level, then the game can go either way. So in this game, White planned very well and executed even better. Maybe that's why he's a world champion. I think that's one of the reasons he was the best player in the world. And move h4 is absolutely spectacular. Now let's look at the game that was played by Kasparov. That one is going to be the unique game. There's going to be a unique game because we're going to see now the defense on a high level, but execution was on a better level. So the game, Kasparov's game against Piquet, the Dutch GM. e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, Sicilian, cd, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, and famous dragon variation, g6, bishop e3, bishop g7, f3, knight c6, queen d2, castles, bishop c4, bishop d7, h4, knight e5, bishop b3, rook c8, and castle for white. Very famous position, ages old, and thousands, maybe 10,000s of games have been played with this position. Knight c4, bishop takes c4, rook takes c4. I'm pretty sure we are still in the opening stage of the game. h5, knight takes h5, and g4, knight f6, bishop h6. This is still opening. Well, I personally don't like this opening because too much is depend on the preparation, home preparation, and less skill. Well, Kasparov does not need to play openings where the less skill involved, but he's extremely strong in opening preparation as well. Knight takes e4, queen e3. This is all theory. Rook takes c3, b takes c, knight f6, knight f6, bishop takes g7, king takes g7. It's 20 moves been played, and still theoretical position. This is little odd. Not too many openings have that far in to the theory. Rook h2, rook h8, knight b3. Okay, let's assess this position. White has an extra exchange. Is that why they are better? No, because white's pawn structure is not great, plus black has a pawn for exchange. So materially, I think it's very balanced position. So what is decisive factors in this position? I think decisive things are here. Who is going to perform attack on opponent's king more effectively? So after knight b3, bishop c6, black is improving position of their pieces. g5, knight h5, and f4. Rook e8 played by black. You can see that black has very solid position. It's very difficult for white to break through. f5 played by Kasparov. Queen b6. Exchange of queens clearly favors black. Knight d4, queen c5. Clearly favors black because they have material equality. They have no weaknesses. Only weakness of theirs in this position is to get mated. If they get mated, that sounds very weak for them. So queen c5, rook e1. White's pieces are more active. You see that inactive knight on h5, inactive rook on e8. So bishop cannot be participating in attacking white's king, so that leaves one queen. One queen is not going to be very dangerous for white's king position. So after rook e1, bishop d7, queen f3, bishop c6. White played queen e3, black played bishop d7, and here Kasparov had difficulties seeing decisive continuation of the ways of improving his position. So he was thinking maybe the best result is a draw, but at last moment he changed his mind. He played queen f2. Black did not play queen takes c3 because of the f6 check. That may be dangerous here. So after queen f2, black played king g8, and now white played rook e2, protecting c3 pawn. Bishop d5, black defended very well. White is still struggling to launch the final blow. Bishop d5, and here Kasparov plays rook takes h5. G takes h5 and queen h4. You can see here, what I can tell you is that queen on h4 threatening queen takes h5 and rook h3. Black has two extra pawns now, but black's pieces are not coordinating, and black cannot get to white's king. Meanwhile, white like a couple of moves away to finish the game. So after queen h4, black went queen c4, trying to get into f1 or a2 to look for some counterplay, because only way black can defend now is by creating counter threats, because black's pieces cannot come to king's side now and help black's king not to get mated. There is no way. You can see that black's pieces cannot infiltrate on king's side. It's too late. There is no paths and no ways. queen c4, queen takes h5, queen f1 check, king b2. Now black has to go e5. Remember, the threat is rook h3. e5. And here Kasparov plays queen h6. On rook h3, black will probably take on d4. And if white plays queen takes h7, trying to escape through e7 square. So that's why in this position, Kasparov played queen h6, cutting off escape square on f8, and preparing either rook h3 or f6 with a mate on g7. King h8. Now on f6, black wants to play rook g8. But then goes g6, threatening to win the h7 pawn with the mate at the same time. Queen takes h7. So black plays f takes g, f takes g. Black cannot play bishop takes g8 because of ugly looking mate with a pawn on g7. So black played rook e7, and after white played simple rook f3 move. The reason why it's simple, because all white wants to do to break the communications between f1 and f8 square for black's queen. Rook f3. Now if bishop takes on f3, then queen f8 mate, obviously. And black is good enough to see this mate in one. They always were. So queen f8 check. And he resigned here. He resigned for good reason, because after bishop g8, white can win black's rook with a continuing threats. Altogether, that makes black's position pretty bad, and they resigned. Very nicely played game by both sides to a certain point. And the emphasis should be made here on the position where it looked like there is no decisive way for white to break through, but position where Kasparov sacrificed back the exchange, gave him all the threats, create a lot of threats on king's side, and black had no ways to bring the pieces for defense, and they did not have any attack on their own. So that was very interestingly played game. But the next game, we're going to see now Kasparov's strength when he planned and he built in the opening opportunities for attack, but he ended up being in total defense most of the game. But now we're going to see how important is defense, an active defense with the possibilities for very sharp counterattack. Now this game is one of my favorites, and I think it's beautifully played by both players. Kasparov was black, and Alexander Belavsky was white. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, d5. This is Grunfeld defense. C takes knight f3 rather. Bishop g7, queen b3, dc, queen c4, castles, e4, knight a6. I've played myself a lot of times this position, but I played mostly for white. And white has quite a few possibilities for very active play. This is Botvinnik variation. And again, we don't want to get too deep into opening part of this game. So bishop e2, c5, d5, e6, bishop g5. All this is very modern theory. ed, knight takes d5, bishop e6. What happened, Kasparov played this opening many times, but here Belявsky, who is had quite a few innovations in a theory, he prepared very dangerous plan for white, dangerous for black. He prepared it for white, and what he did on bishop e6, he played castling long. That looks mighty dangerous because black has some views, these pieces, bishop on g7, bishop on e6, aiming on king's side, and white's king side position, not king's position, does not have enough cover. So after castle, bishop takes d5, black plays rook takes d5, attacking queen, queen b6, bishop takes f6. It looks very dangerous. Now, black gives up dark square bishop, white gives up dark square bishop, and the combination of this bishop on this diagonal plus queen on b6 makes white's position, it looks like white's position is dangerous. But Belявsky had very interesting idea when he went for this position. e5, after bishop takes f6, black played queen takes f6. And e5 for white, and queen f5 for black. Now, bishop d3 and queen c8. Here is what we can say about this position. Black is looking for one move break. Something like if they can go b5, if they can play b5, that will attack white's queen. If white plays queen takes b5, knight c7 forks two major pieces, and if queen moves anywhere on the other side of the board, then c4, attacking bishop, and if bishop moves, then c3, and you will see that black will gain, will be making some dangerous threats. However, it's white's move. And in this position, after queen c8, white played rook d1, and as expected, black played b5. And here, this position was analyzed by Belявsky at home, in home preparation, and his idea was not to defend against black's attack, but prepare very strong counterattack. White played queen h4, knight b4, and here very powerful sacrifice by white. Bishop takes g6. Now, when I analyzed this game at first, when the game was played, it looked to me that black is totally busted, because obviously you cannot take h takes g, because knight comes to g5, and the rest is very gruesome. This attack, white's attack. So black has to play f takes g. Now, what's the idea of the sacrifice? Now rook d7, and you can see all bunch of threats white has. Let's start with queen e7, making deadly threats on 7th horizontal, queen e7, or knight g5, attacking h7 square, and after h6, I don't know, maybe even knight e6. White has some very powerful threats. Here comes move by Kasparov, queen e8. Of course, he has to stop queen e7. Then white goes rook e7. And you can see how dangerous the rook e7 move is. Now, if queen moves anywhere, back to c8 or c6. Then white plays rook d1 to d7. Now, in this attack is very, very difficult to overcome. Well, of course, when player of Kasparov's caliber plays rook e8, rook e7 is the only move he anticipates. And after rook e7, interestingly enough, white is lost. Bishop h6, this is very well designed counterplay. Bishop h6 check. You can see that queen cannot take on h6 because queen is going to take white's rook. Therefore, the move is forced, king b1. And now this is the key of black's defense. The key of black's defense, and we said it before, when you are under severe attack, your best bet is the counterattack. That's the only way you can overcome this. So rook d8. And we can see the point of it. If white takes the rook, rook takes d1 is a checkmate. So this cannot be done, and Belявsky saw the idea, black's idea, but it's too late. White is lost now. Rook d6, played by white. They want to keep the d file shut. If rook takes d6, then e takes d. White is still okay, but here Kasparov plays queen c6. Again, we can tell rook cannot take black's queen because there is a checkmate on d1. At the same time, queen cannot take black's bishop because there is also checkmate. Now, queen e4 check is a checkmate, forced checkmate. Black is one move away from getting mated, but black is mating first. After queen takes e4 check, on king c1, we're going to have queen c2 mate. And king a1, we're going to have very standard and familiar pattern. Knight c2 check, king b1, knight a3 double check. And if king goes to c1, queen c2 mate. And if king goes to b1, then queen b1 mate. So based on this, we can tell that white cannot take black's bishop and white cannot take black's queen. But then black has an extra piece. Black went a3, rook takes d6, e takes d. Now queen takes d6. And all of a sudden, the mate that white was hoping for, mating attack, is not there anymore. A takes b, and another very powerful move, c takes b. Now there are more mating threats like queen d1 and b3 check, and white has no attack. This is the most important part. So queen e4, and black played b3, and in this position, white just resigned. Of course, white could have played a couple of more moves, but on the level they play, it's pointless. Now the threat is queen d1 mate. The only way is queen to play queen e6 check. Then queen will take on e6. Rook will take on e6. Black can play rook c8, threatening the mate on c1. Rook has to go to e1. That didn't happen. Now black has an extra pawn and overwhelming position, something like rook c2, followed by bishop g7 attacking on b2 will end game very quickly. So white resigned. Very powerful play by black and very powerful idea, opening idea by white, and very good attempt. I've seen few games when Kasparov was got mated. And that seemed to me, when I was I was observing this game live, and it seemed to me like this game, the number of those games I just mentioned, when he gets made it's going to be increased by 1. It came very close to this, but it's like, right, tightrope and very nicely defended position. So what we can say here, after reviewing those Kasparov's games, that planned attack and planned activity of your action is very, very important. Now, why don't we talk about importance on defense? Importance of defense is also very well. It's important to be on high alert in defense, and the reason why we are not emphasizing so much on defending game, because we talk about planning of the game. You cannot plan on defense until you see plan of attack. So it has to start with attacking plans. The last game we saw was the masterpiece of defense, but mastering in attack is a lot easier and a lot more important, because defense is the part of the attack. Defense is created by attack. And when you see that you've been under attack, and we're going to look later in a different series about art of defense that is just as important as art of attack. And a lot of times you can find yourself on defending side of the game, and we will have to pay proper attention to it. Thank you very much.